In 1914, the world was on the brink of transformation. The old ways of life, traditions, and empires seemed unshakable, but beneath the surface, change was coming. Horse-drawn carriages still rattled down cobblestone streets, and news traveled slowly, carried by word of mouth or in the pages of newspapers. Beneath this calm, tensions simmered between nations. Old alliances and rivalries shaped every conversation, every glance. A storm was brewing, a conflict soon called the Great War, or World War I. No one could predict just how devastating it would become. It would last 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, and involve countries from every corner of the globe. Empires would rise and fall, and the world would never be the same. Millions of young men left home, believing they fought for honor and a better future. They carried hopes, dreams, and the weight of their nations on their shoulders. They had no idea of the horrors ahead. The world they knew would be changed forever by what they were about to face. This was a new kind of war, fought with terrifying machines and weapons. Technology advanced faster than anyone could imagine, making the battlefield more deadly than ever before. Imagine the world as a fragile clay model, with countries connected by invisible strings. Every action, every decision, tugged at these delicate bonds. Hidden cracks, jealousy, ambition, and rivalry grew until the model shattered. The world's balance was lost in an instant. The Great War broke the world apart, forcing it to be rebuilt in a new way. Borders shifted and lives were changed forever. Our journey will explore why this war happened, the battles fought, and how it ended. We'll uncover the stories behind the headlines and the reasons history remembers. We'll walk the muddy trenches, witness the courage and sorrow, and see how the world was forever changed. The echoes of those days still shape our lives. This is a story of sacrifice and loss. It's a story of families torn apart and of hope that endured, even in the darkest times. It's a lesson about the price of peace and the cost of war. The choices made then still echo in the world today. We remember it, so we never forget what was lost. The names carved in stone remind us of the true cost of conflict. The Great War shaped the world we live in today. Its legacy is all around us, in ways both seen and unseen. Its lessons are carved into the clay of history. Each chapter tells us something vital about who we are. Let's begin our journey back in time to understand how the Great War began and why its story still matters. How did the Great War begin? It's a question that has puzzled people for generations because the answer isn't simple. It wasn't a single event, but a buildup of dangerous forces, like storm clouds gathering before a massive thunderstorm. Historians use the word main, militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism to explain the causes. Militarism, European powers raced to build bigger armies and deadlier weapons, making war seem not just possible, but almost unavoidable. The belief in military might was everywhere. Alliances, secret pacts and promises meant that if one country was attacked, others would join in, like a row of dominoes falling one after another. The Triple Entente, Britain, France, Russia, stood against the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy. Europe was split into two armed camps. These alliances were meant to keep peace, but actually made war more likely because a small conflict could drag everyone in. Imperialism. European nations competed fiercely for colonies and resources, fueling jealousy, rivalry, and suspicion between empires. Nationalism. Intense pride led people to believe their country was superior, and some groups wanted independence from empires that ruled them. The Balkans especially were a powder keg of ethnic tension, with many groups demanding their own nations. All these forces created a world ready to explode, as if Europe was sitting on a ticking time bomb. The stage was set for disaster, and everyone could sense the tension in the air. One spark would ignite the entire continent, turning rivalries and fears into open conflict. The world was holding its breath, waiting for that spark, as if time itself had paused. The cracks in the clay model of Europe were growing wider, threatening to split the continent apart. Each nation wanted more power, more land, more respect, and no one was willing to back down. The competition and mistrust made peace fragile, like a delicate sculpture ready to shatter. The world was a tinderbox, packed with dry straw and waiting for a single spark to set it ablaze. It only needed a match. Just one event to set off a chain reaction. That match was about to be struck, and the world would never be the same. The Great War was moments away, and history was about to change forever. The spark came in June 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and declared war. Alliances triggered a chain reaction. Russia mobilized to help Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and France and invaded Belgium. Britain, defending Belgium, declared war on Germany. In weeks, a local conflict became a full-scale European war. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, faced the Allied powers, Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Japan, and later the United States. Young men rushed to enlist, swept up by patriotism and excitement. Many believed the war would be over by Christmas. They were tragically mistaken. The world plunged into darkness and chaos. The old order was collapsing. The war would touch every life, everywhere. The clay model of Europe was shattering. The Great War had truly begun. Soldiers expected quick battles, but instead found themselves trapped in trench warfare. Trenches stretched for hundreds of miles across Western Europe. Life in the trenches was misery, cold, wet, and filthy. Mud swallowed boots, rats and lice tormented soldiers, and disease was everywhere. The air reeked of death and decay. Days were filled with boredom, fear, and sudden terror. No man's land between the trenches was a deadly wasteland. Shell shock, what we now call PTSD, haunted survivors. The war became a grim struggle against the elements, disease, and despair. Survival was a daily battle. The nightmare seemed endless. World War I was defined by massive, bloody battles. Verdun and the Somme, both in 1916, became symbols of senseless slaughter. At Verdun, the German goal was to bleed France dry. The French held on, but at a terrible cost. Hundreds of thousands died, and the front barely moved. The Somme was even worse. On the first day, the British suffered their worst losses ever. New weapons like tanks appeared, but did little to change the outcome. Over 1 million men became casualties at the Somme for just a few miles of ground. These battles showed that old tactics were useless against modern firepower. Generals were slow to adapt, and soldiers paid the price. The war became a grinding war of attrition. The scale of loss was unimaginable. The land was scarred forever. The lessons were written in blood. By 1917, both sides were exhausted, battered by years of brutal trench warfare and endless fighting. Soldiers on all fronts were weary, and hope was fading. But then, two dramatic events changed the course of the war forever. First, the United States entered the war, bringing fresh energy and resources to the conflict. German U-boats had been sinking ships, killing innocent Americans at sea. And the infamous Zimmermann telegram revealed Germany's secret plan to ally with Mexico against the U.S., shocking the American public. In April 1917, after much debate, America officially declared war on Germany, marking a turning point in the conflict. Fresh American troops and massive supplies began arriving in Europe, giving the weary Allies new hope and much-needed reinforcements. The balance of power started to shift. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Russia was collapsing under the strain of war. The war had devastated Russia. Millions were dead, cities were in ruins, and the people were starving and desperate for change. Revolution erupted, overthrowing the Tsar. Soon after, Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power, promising peace and bread to the suffering nation. Lenin quickly pulled Russia out of the war in 1918 by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ending Russia's involvement. With Russia gone, Germany could now focus all its forces on the Western Front, hoping for a final victory. The stage was set for the final, decisive battles that would determine the fate of the world. The Allies were now stronger than ever, while the Central Powers grew weaker and more desperate. The end of the war was approaching fast. The world was changing at a breathtaking pace, with borders, governments, and lives transformed forever. The outcome of the war still hung in the balance, as both sides prepared for one last push. Everything was about to shift, and the world would never be the same again. With Russia gone, Germany launched a final offensive in 1918, hoping to win before American forces arrived in full. At first, they made huge gains, but their troops were exhausted and supplies ran low. The Allies, now reinforced by Americans, regrouped and counterattacked. The 100 Days Offensive pushed the Germans back. The Hindenburg Line was broken. German morale collapsed. At home, Germany faced starvation, strikes, and revolution. The Navy mutinied, and the Kaiser abdicated. The new German government asked for an armistice. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns finally fell silent. The Great War was over. Europe was in ruins. Millions were dead or wounded. The world would never be the same. The silence was haunting. The cost was beyond measure. The war to end all wars had ended. The end of fighting brought no true peace. 10 million soldiers were dead, 20 million wounded, and millions more lost to the Spanish flu. 4 empires vanished, and new countries emerged from the wreckage. The Treaty of Versailles blamed Germany, imposed harsh penalties, and sowed seeds of future conflict. The League of Nations was created to keep peace, but proved too weak. Women, who had taken on new roles during the war, gained new rights in many countries. Technology and medicine advanced, but so did trauma and disillusionment. The world's faith in progress was shattered. The scars, physical, emotional, and political, ran deep. The 20th century would be shaped by these wounds. The Great War's shadow lingered. The world had lost its innocence. More than a century later, why remember World War I? To honor the millions lost, ordinary people caught in extraordinary events, to learn the dangers of unchecked nationalism, militarism, and alliances. The war teaches us that peace is fragile and must be protected. It reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit, stories of courage, compassion, and hope amid horror. The red poppy became a symbol of remembrance. Lest we forget is a plea to never repeat these mistakes. Remembering is not just about the past, it's about building a better future. The Great War failed to end all wars, but its lessons endure. We must carry them forward. The cost of forgetting is too high. The memory of the Great War guides us still. Let us never forget.